kind of a bombshell when
Yes.
it dropped last week. Stadia is shutting down coming this January.
Yes. Basically, it was announced last Friday. It was this past Friday, like at the end of the night, that Google's Phil Harrison put out a blog post basically saying they're sunsetting the service as of this coming January, and this was speculated. We did a podcast segment on this I think about 2 months ago, and it's been long rumored since then too, with Google shutting down studios and stuff like that. So this has been talked about for a while. It was just a question of when it was going to happen, and it kind of surprised some people that it was going to be as soon as it was. What did you think about when? What were your thoughts when you heard that Google Stadia was shutting down?
It was kind of a surprise because I figured that, they were probably still working with third-party partners, like Ubisoft was still quite on board with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I figured, okay, maybe we'll hear something about a shutdown sometime Q1 of next year, and then by summer next year it'll be okay. Services, if this is the final period of service, so we're just gonna say bye, thanks for all the fish, and that'll be it. And that was kind of that. And then here we are with hey, actually, we're just gonna go ahead and call it quits right now.
Yeah.
And it was just like, whoa, holy shit! I did not realize that the announcement was going to be this soon.
And it was pretty abrupt too, because it seemed like third-party. I think you mentioned third-party publishers that were developing games specifically for Stadia had no idea about this. I think there were also rumors that even the big publishers had no idea that Stadia was shutting down and sunsetting, because I believe some companies that are still developing games for Google Stadia, basically with what they're doing with I guess save data and stuff from Stadia specifically. I'm looking at seeing what companies. I know one was Ubisoft.
Well, Ubisoft has kind of like I guess you could call it an amnesty program of sorts. So if you bought a game on the Stadia service, then you'll get a key for the Ubisoft Uplay service for the equivalent game that you bought. So let's say you bought Assassin's Creed Origins on Stadia, then you'll get a PC copy via the Uplay service, and that has been that. They haven't really announced how save data things are going to work. I know that Ubisoft's blog post that they put about it said that they're trying to research more into this amnesty program. So I assume that by researching, they're also trying to consider the potential hours and hours of time that people invested in the Stadia copy, and possibly are trying to build some sort of save migration program. So, but that's speculation on my part.
Well, Bungie and IO have already said that they're trying to make salvage plans for those who are on Stadia. I know Bungie already has something with Destiny 2, where you can have your save data and your cross progression on multiple different types of services. So
I think the problem with Destiny 2 is any potential microtransaction currency and potentially expansions are still bound to the Stadia account. So they're going to have to figure out a way how to migrate all of those purchases off of Stadia into either a PC copy, or maybe they have to plan for a scenario where maybe the person who's migrating off of Stadia says, well, I don't have a gaming PC, but I got a PS5 for my birthday or something. I'm really interested in playing Destiny 2 on my PS5. How do I get all of my expansions and microcurrency off of the Stadia version onto my PS5 version? So I'm assuming they're trying to come to grips with scenarios like that.
Well, the unfortunate problem with that is going to be that a lot of the platform holders, especially Microsoft and Sony, they require that if you are going to use a DLC from a game that must be purchased on their storefront. So I don't, unless they come up with some kind of sweetheart agreement. Well, Bungie might, since they're owned by Sony, but maybe not with Microsoft. They would have to come up with some kind of contractual reasoning or contractual amendment where they are allowed to take people from Stadia and give them those DLC for free. Because if you most games, MLB is MLB The Show, of course. I'm going to use that as an example. It is an example I have where if I buy the premium currency on Xbox, if I go to PS5, it's not there. Same thing with multiverses. If I bought premium currency for multiverses on Xbox, I go on Steam, it's not there. And that's because there is a contractual reasoning that if you are going to use the currency, you have to use it on our platform. So if you buy it on our platform, you can only use it on our platform. If you buy it on another platform, we're not going to allow you to use it on ours because of, I guess, money reasons, because we're paying for the service and whatever. I don't know exactly the reason why that is. So I foresee that people might get their save data, but they will probably have to repurchase all the expansions, which sucks. But one of the things that Stadia did announce is that they are refunding everybody for all their purchases for the hardware and software in the service. So as much as a pain in the ass that is, I mean, I can see Bungie basically saying, "Hey, if you want the expansions, take the refund that you got, purchase them on PlayStation, then you're good." And that's it. I mean, you can. They may not even have to do that. So there's that. At least I think.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how this all pans out because just there's really no telling on how this could just kind of pan out. But I'm sure once January hits, it's just going to be a fucking wild time.
I got a question for you. What caused Stadia to fail in this? Because this is now considered a failure now. What do you think it that caused Stadia to basically not reach the potential that it was meant to? Because there was a moderate amount of hype for this service. What do you think is what killed it?
To borrow from some anecdotal data that Jeff Gerstmann talked about in last week's episode of the Jeff Gerstmann Show, it seemed to be that Google really didn't have any fucking clue on how to run a gaming operation. Because one of the anecdotes that he was talking about in his episode last week was that when Stadia was revealed, Google was just kind of relying on their clout, going, "Hey, yeah, we're Google. We're doing this gaming service thing. It's going to be like the hot shit because, well, duh, we're Google. The whole world knows us." Mm-hmm. So you'd have to be an idiot not to jump on the Stadia bandwagon,
right?
And it was just kind of this blind application of clout that had no sense of hubris in it, and unfortunately, I think that just kind of compounded things because they also kind of expected people to buy games, and buying games on an online-only service that could potentially vaporize overnight. That's going to be a hard sell for a lot of people on the consumer end, because just knowing that your inventory could just up and vanish one day, I mean, it's something that a lot of people just aren't comfortable with. I mean, it's not like Steam, where in the Steam user agreement, there is a subclause that says, hey, in the event that the Steam service does go bust, we will be distributing a unlocking mechanism that would allow you to play all of your games without the need for the Steam DRM in the catastrophic event that the Steam service does go belly up and defunct.
Yeah.
So at least with Steam you have that, but with Stadia there was no such guarantee. It was just kind of if we go belly up, then that's it. Your inventory goes up in smoke. And so you have that that also compounded things. But another thing that compounded the issue was there were a lot of potential free-to-play games that were really interested in Stadia, and Google just outright rejected them. They were just like, we don't want a free-to-play game on Stadia. We're looking for big AAA titles that sell hundreds of millions of copies. We're not interested in free-to-play stuff. When, in my mind, if they had at least maybe entertained the idea of some free-to-play stuff, then that could have been a potential gateway, because at least with the free-to-play angle, you've got people who may be willing to dump good money on the microtransactions, and it would have been great because for free-to-play games, you could potentially end up starting on Stadia, but just if you get like a nice gaming PC, then you could kind of move on to playing a free-to-play game on Epic or something. Or maybe you finally get a 9th gen console and you're just like, hey, I really want to play this free-to-play game on my PS5 instead. So it would have been sort of a great gateway drug for anyone who really wasn't committed to buying a gaming computer or any sort of gaming console. And yeah, just from the anecdotes that Jeff Gerstmann had when he talked to some people associated with development studios and stuff about the Stadia reveal, he had said that there were some studios who had tried to talk Google into maybe entertaining the idea of hosting free-to-play games, and Google was just like, nope, we are simply not interested. We just want major release AAA titles. We don't want any free-to-play stuff. We just want actual factual retail games.
You mean to tell me that is a terrible business decision? Because you mean to tell me that if Fortnite came or Epic came with Fortnite and go, hey, we want to put it on Stadia, they went, no? Like, are you fucking serious right now?
Yeah,
that's
according
terrible.
to the stories from Jeff Gerstmann, that was a scenario that likely happened, that because in his anecdotal story he had said that there were some big studios, I can't name names due to NDAs and stuff, but there were some big studios who had big free-to-play games that were trying to tell Google, hey, we'd love to maybe try to put our game on your service, and Google just told them flat out, we're not interested in free-to-play, buzz off.
And then I also heard a rumor that Hideo Kojima was making a single-player game exclusively on Stadia and was developing it, and then it was canceled by Phil Harrison because they wanted to concentrate on a multiplayer game at some point, which, hello. I don't know if you know who Hideo Kojima is, but even if the games aren't everyone's cup of tea, they sell. So if you have someone like Kojima who's interested and said, yeah, I'll do an exclusive game with you, how do you not put the money down to do that? That is utterly ridiculous.
And the man is a beloved video game auteur. I mean,
yes.
he's the guy behind the Metal Gear Solid games and more recently the Death Stranding games. And it's just like, how the hell do you basically tell that guy, yeah, just buzz off. We're not interested in your weird outlandish idea.
That is so fucking stupid. I couldn't believe it when I heard that. But yeah, and a lot of people are also pointing out that this possibly is Phil Harrison's fault. I don't know if that's the case, but the man's got a track record for killing everything that he's come across. So wasn't he was still on Xbox when the Xbox One was first released, if I recall correctly. Am I right?
He and Don Matrick were on the same roster at the same time.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was for anyone who's forgotten who Don Matrick is, he was the guy who had the terrible phrase of telling U.S. military members that, you want an Xbox One, but you won't be able to reliably connect to the internet? We've got a console for you. It's called the Xbox 360.
Oh my god, I remember that too. Oh man. He left Sony and then went to Infogrames and Atari, which got shut down. Then Gaikai, which got sold to Sony and then got shut down. And then went to Microsoft and helped with the development of the Xbox One, which we all know how that ended. And yeah, then he's been with Google, and he just seems like oh man, I hate to say this because I don't know the guy and everything, but he's a failing upwards guy. Someone who almost fails wherever he goes, and yet he moves up everywhere he goes when that happens. That blows me away with him. Oh my god. I wish I had that kind of track record. That if I fail, I still succeed. Jesus.
Yeah. There is a bit of silver lining in the Google Stadia tale. Google Stadia will be refunding all purchases.
Yes.
And that's not not just games, but we're also talking hardware. So if you're one of those people who bought the Founders Edition kit, that if memory serves me correctly, that came with a special Stadia controller that was like a deep navy blue with some orange in it. And then it also came with a Chromecast Ultra 4K device. I think that kit was in itself was $130. And then you had the standard kit, which was $100, which came with one of the standard color controllers and a Chromecast Ultra. Then yeah, if you bought one of those kits, you were getting your full $100 or $130 back from Google.
Yeah.
All games you bought, complete refunds. And the only thing that they are not refunding is if you decide to do the Stadia Pro subscription, which was I think like 10 or 13 bucks a month. I forget offhand. It's been so long since I've read into it. But if you paid into doing the Stadia Pro subscriptions, you will not be getting any of that money back.
Yeah, which I kind of understand because it's service, and if we're no longer offering the service, then yeah, you're fine. You got the amount of time that you got from that service. Fine. That's great as for goodwill, because that was the one thing that I think I questioned when it came down to what would they do in the end when they shut this place down, because like I saw like some were speculating, oh, they'll keep the service up just to let those guys play, but they won't update anymore, which I was like, no, they wouldn't do that. That's not. But the fact that they're refunding all the purchases is, I think, a really good thing, which then, again, goes into the line of if you want to get the game somewhere else and they're not offering it on another server, or they're not offering a free key, if you really want to play the game, you can repurchase it. So that is an option that you have to do that on these games. And this is going to help them, I would say, this helped them in the PR battle, because then there was no talk of, oh my god, I purchased all these games on Stadia, now I have no access to them, I'm screwed. And then they would have to deal with lawsuits and stuff like that, which I don't think the lawsuit would have went anywhere. But I mean, this is good PR on their end, on a shit sandwich, pretty much, that they're shutting the entire service down.
There is kind of another growing concern that's coming up right now with regards to the Stadia service situation. And that particular concern would be, what happens with all the developers who spent a lot of their hard-earned time trying to make a Stadia exclusive game that may have used some sort of middleware that was part of the Stadia framework? And a lot of developers are now kind of trying to scramble and figure things out. In particular, one developer that kind of made a big splash in the wave of the Stadia cancellation was Tequila Works. They had a game that was a Stadia exclusive, but with Stadia now being discontinued, a lot of their fans were like, okay, well, Guilt was one of your exclusive games. What's going to happen to this? And apparently the CEO of Tequila Works put on to social media that they are looking into porting Guilt to other platforms.
Right.
So you've got stories like that, which are starting to come out of the woodwork, which is great to see people being able to potentially shift their projects away from Stadia. But the big question is, all of the Stadia exclusive games or so forth, will they be able to get their games off of the service so that their games can live on other platforms?
Unfortunately, I mean, that's the nature of business, that especially when you're relying on another business to run your business, It sucks that some of these developers are going to have a hard time. They may not even be able to afford to actually to make their games on another platform because they spent all their money on doing Stadia. Like that's rough. But that's unfortunate. But that's just unfortunately how it is. Like on that, like you can remember some developers who were making Wii U games. Until Nintendo basically said, yeah, we're not doing Wii U games anymore. We're sunsetting it and moving on to the new one. And there are these developers who were like, oh my God, but we were developing games for Wii U. What are we going to do? And you have a couple of options. You can continue and release it and get as much as you can, or you can scrap the entire project, or you can just try and get more money from another developer to port it over to another service. I mean, it sucks, but that's unfortunately the nature of this business. And I feel bad for them, but can't do anything about that, unfortunately. I want to get into one more thing about why I think Stadia overall failed. And it has to do with perception. And I remember when Stadia released, before it released, people were hyping it up, and people in the press were essentially they were impressed by Stadia when they got to get their hands on it. They thought that it was relatively lag free. It worked well, a little latency, but it looked good. So yeah, it could be a viable service. And then when it was released, I remember this one video that was shared on Twitter like millions of times. And it was this guy who was playing Destiny 2 on PC. And all he did was press the space bar. And then 3 seconds later, his character jumped. And that was all was needed for Stadia to fail, to me at least. Because Stadia was a speculative business to a certain extent. People were not sure this was going to work. Because people still want hard copies. And they want to have local copies of their games. Because of things like latency, lag, and all that stuff, and just having it in the cloud, a lot of people thought we didn't really have the infrastructure for that to work. Now, it turned out that the Stadia service was still pretty good, but after you have something like that pop up, I mean, that, to me, that was like, oh, this is not going to last. Because that's your first impression right there. And if that's getting all the views and getting all the attention, then no one's going to give the service a shot. I mean, that's what happened to me. When I saw that, I was like, oh yeah, never mind. I'll play it on Xbox, or I'll play it on PlayStation, or I'll play it on Steam, whatever. I don't care. Like, I don't need to bother with Stadia if that's what I'm going to have to deal with. Forget it. And I've forgotten about it since. What do you think?
The perception of latency is definitely an important thing for gamers, especially with regards to competitive games. I mean, one of the most competitive video games out there is literally on the Stadia service, and that's Destiny 2, because Crucible, the PvP mode, is just all about just getting the jump on your enemies, and nothing like having latency just rob you of that killing shot. That would be absolutely frustrating in the minds of many. Just, I hit jump right at the right time, but this dude just popped me right before my character was actually going to jump and get away from being hit with a rocket or something.
This is not a surprise to, I think, anybody except for people who are really Stadia diehards. And apparently there are some, because there have been posts going out there with people who have 6,000 hours on Red Dead Redemption 2 on Stadia, and they love the service and they're upset that it's going, which I feel for them. I do. But everyone was saying, oh, this is going to get killed. This is not going to last. And that turned out to be the case after, I think it's going to be 5 years, I believe, at this point. But, I mean,
yeah.
What this, to me, Zero, tells me is that cloud gaming isn't going anywhere. It's going to be around, but it can't be the main business that you have. It has to be something like xCloud with Microsoft, where it's part of getting a whole suite of tools in order to actually experience your games. So that's where I think cloud gaming is going to be. It has to be an ancillary service to what you get with your main gaming diet, instead of the main way of playing it. And gamers are very sensitive about this too. They want to feel like they own their games. They have a physical representation of the games that they have, even if that physical manifestation just does not matter. I hate to say it to you guys, it doesn't matter at this point. But they want to know that A, the service is going to stay, and B, I'll have access to it at any time. And that comfort wasn't there with Stadia. And no one was going to spend $60 to $70 on a game where the exact thing that they were afraid of was going to happen, which is the service gets shut down and I have no access to my games. So, and that dogged the entire Stadia experience throughout its entire life cycle. What do you think?
Yeah, I would certainly say that just the tangibility and the guarantee of access were likely two big reasons that just many gamers really didn't buy in and invest into Stadia. And it's kind of sad too, because Stadia had some great ideas. Like, one of the ideas that was in Stadia was that if you were stuck in a game, then you could actually pull up like a sort of like Steam overlay sort of thing by hitting the Stadia button. Mm-hmm. And it would bring up an overlay, and if you were on a quest, then this overlay would also detect which quest you're on, and then it would bring up all the relevant YouTube videos on that quest. So you could just go, oh, cool, this guy's got a walkthrough on how this quest is supposed to be beaten, sweet. And then just, boom, you just click on the video in this overlay, and then you could basically kind of see how the quest is done, or how you complete a certain challenge to get a trophy or something. And yeah, just a really great idea. I know the PS5 has sort of iterated on that with the game guide function on PS5. Mm-hmm. Though with the game guide, it's more kind of a hint on, yeah, here's where to find, the secret statue, or here's the exact criteria you need to do to unlock this specific trophy. So PS5 has a similar feature, but the whole integration of YouTube into Stadia, I think that was a really cool and solid idea. But yeah, it's a shame that just that sort of thing will be going away. But I know that with the closure announcement, there was a mention that Google will still be playing around with the Stadia technology, and they'll be working with their partners to leverage the technology. So in my mind, I think the future of Stadia is probably going to be something like a interactive demo of a game. Mm-hmm. So instead of having to, just buy the game and find out, oh, hey, yeah, it's totally not for me. Instead, you can grab your Xbox or PlayStation controller or your Switch controller, sync it up to your PC via Bluetooth, play the game in your browser, and with like a really, really meaty demo, and just being able to sell that technology to third-party publishers like Capcom and so on and so forth.
I mean, they could also use it as a means for publishers to, when they do demos or they do builds for, let's say, I don't know, like EA games. Like if they want to show them to like journalists or YouTubers, here's the latest build of X Need for Speed game. You're going to go on to your Google Stadia thing and go ahead and play it. I mean, that could be an interesting business investment for Google. That could work. But, yeah. Again, am I surprised that this is getting shut down? Not at all. Like, they made critical mistakes. And with the talk of what their business practices were, it's no wonder. But I feel bad for the people who invested in it, but hopefully they'll be able to take the purchase that they have, bring it somewhere else, and be able to enjoy their games and get their save data too, which I think some of them are doing, but some of them are not. Thank you for listening to this podcast segment. The Capital Games podcast is done every week, and we post it on all your favorite podcast apps, as well as segments on YouTube. If you want to listen to another segment, you can listen to a new one right there on the screen. We also do a movie podcast called the Capital Games Movie Club. If you'd like, you can go ahead and click on that and see all the movies that we have reviewed from that point. Thank you for listening, and we hope to hear from you soon.